Jogi to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vickers, and it's a pleasure to speak in my first Westminster Hall debate as the Member of Parliament for Newcastle-under-Lyme, and I'm delighted to see you in the chair to share this special moment with me. Now, yesterday my dad had some very serious surgery, Mr. Vickers, and I want to start by thanking the NHS staff who looked after him and thousands of other cancer patients like him in Newcastle-under-Lyme and across our country. I'd like to also welcome the Minister. She's going to hear a lot from me in the weeks and months ahead, just as she and the Secretary of State have since the election. Now, this debate is focused on and around waste crime in Staffordshire, and so I'll touch on that and then focus on the disgraceful situation that is Walleys Quarry landfill in my constituency. Chair, the true scale of waste crime is, by its nature, difficult to quantify. Those who are actively involved in waste crime normally seek to evade detection and leave the rest of us to pay the price. In July 2023, the Environment Agency found that approximately 18% of all waste is illegally managed, equating to 34 million tonnes. This is, as others will know, equivalent to enough waste to fill Wembley Stadium 30 times over. My view is simple. We cannot allow these criminals, because that is what you are when you commit a crime, to get away, to enrich themselves, and to ignore the law any longer. The previous government's resources and waste strategy defines waste crime as anything that intentionally breaks the law relating to the handling and disposal of waste. Waste crime can be motivated by landfill tax evasion and generally covers activities including illegal exports of waste, large-scale fly tipping, illegal burning of waste, the illegal operation of waste sites, non-compliance with the waste duty of care, the misclassifying of waste and falsifying records. And I hope the Minister, in her response, will set out whether she agrees with that definition and whether it's fit for purpose, and whether she'll look to update the resources and waste strategy. Mr. Vickers, the Environment Agency's National Waste Crime Survey 2023 report stated that waste crime cost the economy in England, or rather cost my constituents in Newcastle-under-Lyme and in our county of Staffordshire and across England, an estimated £1 billion per year through evaded tax, environmental and social harm, and lost legitimate business. This represents a 55% increase since 2015 at an estimate of £604 million a year. I know the Minister will share my anger at the current situation, and I look forward to her setting out what we will do as a government to get a grip of this situation. There is a relatively long list of offences that constitute a waste crime, and I would urge colleagues to have a look. I had originally planned to read them out, but it was a full side of A4, and I didn't want to detain the House any longer than necessary. But we have a long list of offences, Mr. Vickers, but the waste crimes continue to blight communities at pace.
Will the member give way?
I will.
Thank you, and thank you for giving way to me and securing such an important debate. Last year, the Environment Agency released its National Waste Crime Survey results for 2023, which found that 86% of farmers surveyed were affected by fly tipping. In my own constituency of Tamworth, residents have raised their own frustrations about the damage that this causes to the countryside and also the harm that it can cause to nature. So does the member agree that we need more collaboration between land managers, local authorities, police and the Environment Agency to better protect farmers against fly tipping, which for many of our constituencies is a prolific example of rural crime?
Thank you, Ms. Vickers. I thank my honourable friend, the member for Tamworth, for that intervention. She speaks quite rightly about the importance of cross-agency working to get these issues addressed, and I represent a number of farmers in Newcastle-under-Lyme, and I know that my farmers will share her farmers' concerns, and I thank her for raising that point. Mr. Vickers, we all have examples where waste crimes have taken place, as the member for Tamworth has just set out, and yet there are plenty of examples where there's no enforcement or prosecution. So can I ask the Minister if she's assessed the adequacy of the long list of offences? If so, is she happy with them? And if not, what's the plan to make sure we get that right? The impacts, Mr. Vickers, of waste crime are widespread, with adverse effects on our constituents, businesses, public services, the environment and the economy. For example, illegal waste sites can pollute the environment through the release of noise, dust, surface or groundwater contamination, or through unauthorised fires and burning. Now, this applies to Walleys Quarry, formerly Red Industries RM Limited in Newcastle-under-Lyme, both in terms of dangerous and unacceptable levels of hydrogen sulphide being pumped into my community, and through the fire that took place on the evening of August the 4th, 2024. Sites like Walleys and other relevant landfills are unlikely to treat the waste in compliance with environmental best practice. These same companies divert waste from legitimate businesses, reducing their potential income streams, viability and competitive advantage. The cost of remediating fly-tipped waste falls to public services and our constituents. Now, Mr Vickers, I'm grateful to Keep Britain Tidy for their helpful briefing ahead of this debate, and I suspect colleagues who are here would have enjoyed that briefing too. And I want to acknowledge all the work that Keep Britain Tidy does to reclaim our green spaces, to clean our streets and roads, and to keep our communities safe and clean.
Will the honourable member give way?
I will give way to another Staffordshire friend.
Thank you for giving way and supporting such an important debate on this most pressing issue. Would the member agree with me that voluntary organisations like those in my constituency, Burntwood Litter Heroes and Lichfield Litter Legends, really do deserve the support and respect of their members for doing all the work that they do to keep our communities tidy alongside the work of Keep Britain Tidy?
Thank you, Mr Vickers. I thank my friend, the member for Lichfield, for that intervention, and I too would like to pay tribute to the organisations in his constituency who do so much important work, and I very much like the alliteration of Lichfield Litter Legends, so you can pass our collective best wishes to them. Now, Mr Vickers, fly tipping is the top environmental challenge faced by many communities, not least in Staffordshire, as we've heard from my colleagues, the members for Lichfield and Tamworth, neighbours in fact. Despite resources going into tackling fly tipping, education, monitoring, enforcement and removal, incidents of fly tipping continue to increase. And the education point for real people in the real world, as opposed to rich criminals in the waste crime world, in my view, is so important. This has got to be about pride in our communities, in our homes, towns and villages. And this government, our government, this new government, must lead by example and help restore it. In a previous life, Mr Vickers, I worked for the then Shadow Minister for Waste Crime, my honourable friend from Newport West. She often raised, and I know because I wrote many of the speeches, the high levels of recycling in Wales. So what discussions has the Minister had with the Welsh Government about best practice, and what lessons can we learn from the Labour Government in Wales? I see my friend from Vale is here. This issue is a particular concern to residents on the paddocks in Crossheath and Newcastle-under-Lyme, and I'm working with Councillor John Williams and Councillor Jill Williams on how we can hold the borough and county councils to account. Fly tipping is also an issue to many residents in Bradwell, and I would like to thank one particular resident, Jane Rushton, for her tenacity and her commitment to keeping her community clean and free of fly tips. I was at her house quite recently. She makes a very good cheese sandwich and an even better date loaf. I know she's working with Councillor Andrew Fox-Hewitt, Councillor Leslie Richards and Councillor Annabel Lawley to do just that. Mr Vickers, the Environmental Services Association, otherwise known as the trade body representing the UK's resource and waste management industry, published a report back in 2021 counting the cost of UK waste crime, and these figures are relevant to now. It broke down the estimated financial impact of waste crime in England from 2018 to 2019 as follows. Fly tipping cost 392 million, illegal waste sites 236 million, misclassification 120 million, exemption breaches 87 million, illegal exports 42 million, and waste fires 22 million. That was then, and this is now. They are extraordinary sums. And so can the Minister let us know what current assessment has been made of the financial impact of waste crime in the last year, 2022-23? I suspect she'll have to write to me, so I don't expect her to have all those figures now, but I will appreciate a written response. Back in January 2018, the last Conservative government published their 25-year environment plan. That plan set an ambition to eliminate waste crime and illegal waste sites over the lifetime of the plan, so by 2043. There is no evidence of that in Newcastle-under-Lyme, and whilst I urge the Minister to commit to eliminating waste crime and illegal waste sites, I urge her to give us deeds and not just words. And so can she confirm that the government will update the 25-year environment plan to make it fit for purpose? In 2018, Mr Vickers, the Environment Agency was given new powers to tackle the problem of illegal waste sites. This included the power to lock up sites, block access to them, and to require rogue operators to clean up their actions. So can I ask the Minister how many illegal waste sites have been locked up since 2018? Can I ask how many illegal waste sites have had access to them blocked? And what does the requirement on rogue operators actually look like? Mr Vickers, I'd like to turn to the disgraceful story of Walleys Quarry. I want to start by paying tribute to every local person who has raised their concerns, who has tried to fight for clean air and the safe environment that everybody in our country and in our constituency deserves. Thank you to all those who've campaigned to stop the stink. I first met Dr. Scott, a GP in Silverdale, back in 2021, and the situation facing local people has only got worse since he made then clear the health impacts, and he did recently at the public inquiry that the Council held last month. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Mick Salt for his tireless commitment and his sheer tenacity. There's a theme here: tenacious people are aplenty in Newcastle-under-Lyme, and to every local person who cares about getting this issue resolved. And Mr. Vickers, I'm very pleased to welcome two of my constituents, Sheila and John, who made it down from Newcastle-under-Lyme to be in the gallery for this debate. We're also joined by the Deputy Mayor of Newcastle-under-Lyme, and the Shadow Minister will be pleased to know that Councillor Robert Betley-Smith is a Conservative Party councillor, and by Councillor Jacqueline Brown, a very good friend of mine and an excellent Labour councillor in Silverdale. Finding a way through on Walleys cannot be party political. For far too long, or for too long I should say, the previous Conservative government refused to meaningfully engage with the then Labour opposition, and I know because I worked for the Shadow Minister at the time. And for too long in the Council chamber at Castle House in Newcastle-under-Lyme, good ideas tabled by Labour councillors are voted down by the Tories purely because they are Labour ideas. That is no way for us to deliver for the people who sent me here. So I welcome both members of the Council to this session today and appreciate their support for my efforts to get the blight that is Walleys closed, capped and safely and securely restored. Of course, this isn't going to be easy, because if it was, surely to God, it would have happened already. My constituents have had enough. They want to know what actually has to happen for action to be taken. How bad do things have to get? How many people need to be stuck in their homes, unable to open the windows, sit in their gardens, or breathe without inhaling toxic fumes? They want to know why Newcastle feels like a dumping ground for other people's waste. They want to see real action from those with enforcement powers to help clean their air, to hold the operators to account, and to finally rid our town of the disgusting, disgraceful and toxic levels of hydrogen sulfide. Mr. Vickers, my first words in the House after taking my oath were on Walleys. I promised local people that I would hit the ground running, that I would champion their determination for clean air, healthier lungs, heads and hearts, and I've tried to do exactly that. In August, Mr. Vickers, Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council held a two-day public inquiry into Walleys Quarry, and I want to share my opening remarks with the House. These words were said on behalf of those who live, learn and work in my constituency. Like so many of the people who live, learn and work in Newcastle-under-Lyme, I'm angry. Angry that nothing has changed. Angry by the failures of the Environment Agency to give local people what they need, which is action, not words. I've been, or at least I was then, the Member of Parliament for Newcastle-under-Lyme for almost 6 weeks. And there isn't a day that this disgraceful situation isn't raised with me. I'll work every day to get justice for local people and give us the chance to finally move on. Just this morning, I was with local businesses and heard the impact and pressures they face. Over the last week, I've heard from many local people terrified by the fire that took place on Sunday, the 4th of August. And I note that we still wait, or at least we did then, for the results of the fire investigation. We need to know what happened, why it happened, and what lessons will be learned to make sure it never happens again. And hours after the fire, the site was accepting waste again. That is completely and utterly unacceptable in my view. No operator who wants to be a fair and good neighbour, who had regard for the impact of their activities on local residents, would have accepted waste so quickly. I will happily give way to the member for Strangford.
I want to come down and support Dale Whitman because he and I have been friends long before he became an MP, and I want to just come along and support him on his actions on behalf of his constituents and those who are here today. Does the honourable member not agree that the complexity of addressing today waste crime means that situations in his constituency and indeed across other parts of the United Kingdom as well, including my own, make urgent action very difficult? And what we really need is new legislation. What we need is punitive fines, which will hurt them hard. And what has to be central is that the honourable gentleman's constituents and their opinions are key to any change to ensure that their viewpoints are not forgotten about.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. I thank the member for Strangford. I feel I've, in a parliamentary context, come of age to have been intervened on by the member for Strangford. So thank you, thank you. Never forget your first time. Never forget your first time with the member for Strangford. There you are. Well, my wife is indeed from Northern Ireland, so we'll stop that one there. But Mr. Vickers, I'm grateful to the member for his intervention because he raises an interesting point. Lots of people in my constituency were told that everything would be done within the law. So the simple response for me is let's change the law, and the Minister already knows some of my thoughts on that, and although we have a very busy legislative programme for the general election, this is something I'll be pushing very strongly and proactively indeed. Now, the investigation into the fire concluded that it was most likely caused by a lithium battery, but two things on this. No battery was found, which raises some very serious questions and Walleys' permit doesn't allow for lithium batteries to be disposed of. My call is simple. We need the site closed, capped and restored, and we need that done now. I've made that point to anyone who will listen and will keep doing so. Today I'm here as the Member of Parliament for Newcastle-under-Lyme, and I'm here to give voice to all the people who have raised this issue with me directly over the last couple of years. We now need the Environment Agency to honour its responsibility to the people who live, learn and work here. Simply put, Chair, and the Chair is in the gallery, Councillor Beckley-Smith, enough is enough. I look forward to answering your questions. Now, Mr Vickers, I would like to acknowledge the work of the cross-party committee leading that inquiry. I welcome the invitation to speak before the committee because I wanted Newcastle's MP in the room, helping shape the way forward and delivering the results that local people want and desperately need. The stress, concern and fear that hydrogen sulphide emissions coming from that site cannot be underestimated. This is having a real impact on people's lives, and it has done for many years now. There have been more than 100 breaches of the permit held by Walleys. Now, Mr Vickers, can you imagine if any citizen broke an agreement, or broke the law, or got caught speeding more than 100 times? Imagine if there'd been more than 100 parties in Downing Street. There must be real penalties and real enforcement. And in advance of this debate, the Chief Executive of Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council provided me with the number of complaints received by the Borough Council from 2019 to date. And this goes up to the end of August 24. And it's a total of 32,315. 32,315 of my constituents have shared their rage, their anger and their frustration. Now, residents are also encouraged to report complaints to the Environment Agency, and so I suspect there'll be many more too. More than 30,000 people over 5 years have said enough is enough. And we, all of us, the relevant agencies from the Borough and County Council to the Environment Agency and Whitehall must listen. Now, I acknowledge the work of the former Tory MP in my constituency for his work on this issue. But the simple fact is the people of Newcastle-under-Lyme have been let down, left behind, and that must change. By the Environment Agency, by the last government. I will happily give way to my neighbour.
Thank you. That's the point I was making. My constituency of Stoke-on-Trent South joins yours, and actually the smell that we get from Walleys Quarry has extended into the northward region of my constituency, which itself has experienced repeated fly tipping, causing harm to farmers. But I just want to reiterate the impact that Walleys Quarry have had on the lives of the residents of Newcastle-under-Lyme and further afield in terms of the quality of their day-to-day living, but crucially their health, especially that of young children, but also on the sellability of their homes, meaning that they are stuck in this no future that they can move on, and that this cannot carry on any further.
Thank you, Ms Vickers. I'm very grateful to my neighbour, the member for Stoke-on-Trent South, and the fact that the member for Stoke-on-Trent Central is sitting next to her, I think speaks to the sense of collective both experience and frustration we feel in North Staffordshire. I'm grateful for their support, not just for me in our fight to get this sorted, but also for the support I know that your constituents have for mine. So thank you for your intervention. Now, by the Environment Agency, by the last government, and by those who could help us get this sorted, I would also like to acknowledge the tireless and passionate work of local councillors in our community. Can the Minister let us know what assessment she's made of the work of the Joint Unit for Waste Crime? I know we're in the early days of this new government, but we need to see and know that these agencies are being held accountable and have the powers required to get things done. And talking of agencies, Mr Vickers, let me turn to the Environment Agency. My view is simple. It is simply not fit for purpose. Its responsibilities are far too wide, and in our case locally, people have lost faith in the Environment Agency's ability to stand up for us against landfill operators who act like cowboys and have no regard for the health and well-being of their neighbours. I base this on what has happened in my constituency with Walleys Quarry, the land at Doddlespool and Elms Farm, and what may very well happen at the Bradwell West Quarry. With all the criminal activity that seemingly, and indeed knowingly in some cases, that takes place, or that seems to surround certain elements of the waste industry, something is wrong. Under the last Conservative government, we had a perfect storm. Major cuts to local government, savage cuts to the number of staff and the budget of the Environment Agency, and an apparent disregard for how serious waste crime is. That must change. And so whilst I acknowledge the financial crisis we inherited, we can and should use the law to give my constituents the clean air and healthy lungs they need and deserve. I don't know what discussions my predecessor had with ministers in the last Conservative government, and so I can't speak for what happened before July the 5th, and that's why I secured this debate. I welcome the Secretary of State signing off the Council's ability to take action against Walleys, and I believe that the last Conservative minister left it sitting on the desk. I would urge the Minister to think about introducing a fit and proper person test for those seeking a permit to operate a landfill site. That will go some way to ensuring that those who have taken the mick can no longer do so. I'd be happy to meet the Minister to talk about that in detail. Now, back in January 2024, Mr Vickers, the new Secretary of State came to Newcastle-under-Lyme to meet local campaigners and Councillor Jacqueline Vaughan in Silverdale. He smelt, he listened, and he understood the situation we face. This, as my honourable friend from Stoke-on-Trent South noted, is a health crisis as much as it is an environmental one. And there is major concern in the community about the health impacts, about the fact that the health impacts haven't been acknowledged properly. So can I ask the Minister to meet with me and the Health Minister to address the health impact of this waste crisis in Newcastle-under-Lyme? We need, Mr Vickers, a closure notice, and I urge the Environment Agency to do this immediately. We need the site properly and safely capped, and then we need a restoration plan that is fit for purpose. In recent weeks, we've heard calls from the Borough Council and the County Council about the financial element of the restoration plan. I've got a simple question. What on earth is going on? What happened to the financial modelling behind the restoration plan? Why are we now realising that it requires external support, and why wasn't this raised before? This did not become an issue post-July the 5th. Those who could have and should have had their eyes on the ball and their fingers on the pulse have been found wanting. I don't think any of my constituents should be paying for the failures of the state at all levels. So will the Minister go back to the department with my suggestion that we look at how the Environment Agency operates in terms of how and what they do with the money they receive from enforcement action? Just a couple more questions for the Minister. How much money does the Environment Agency collect in enforcement each year, and how can we ensure that that money is used to right the wrongs? Those who break the law and the Environment Agency is responsible for upholding the law should be the ones who pay for their mess. I believe that Walleys Quarry Limited has a bond with the Environment Agency of, I think, about £1.8 million. Now, I've been told by some of those who should know that the safe, secure restoration of this site could cost as much as £20 million. This isn't new. This isn't a revelation. The right people have known about it, and it simply hasn't been addressed. Now, following my election, Mr Vickers, I submitted a range of written parliamentary questions asking to see communication between the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs and Staffordshire County Council, between the Department and the Environment Agency, and between the Borough Council and the Department. In a response, I was told that it would cost too much money to process those. I'll happily give way.
In terms, would you agree with me that whilst we, in this difficult financial economic situation that we are in the country at the moment, cost and finances are an important consideration. However, we need to be careful of false economies, and that within areas such as Newcastle-under-Lyme constituency and my own Stoke-on-Trent South, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is quite a major issue, and that the impact on the NHS of poor air quality, for example, can actually be as expensive. And so any actions to address air quality and the waste can actually save money in the long run in terms of health.
Thank you, Mr Vickers, and I am winding up my initial remarks. I thank my honourable friend for Stoke-on-Trent South for her intervention, and she raises a really important point, because a healthy workforce is an active workforce, and an active workforce helps ensure that the growth that this government is seeking to bring to communities like mine, communities like hers and up and down our country, including Keighley, we need to make sure we tackle toxic air, air pollution, and clean our air. So I thank her for making that very important point, and for the promotion to Right Honourable.
Yes,
Didn't get that through the whips. I was told that to see the correspondence between the three agencies and the department would cost too much money. So I say to the Minister, I'm happy to come to the department any day, any time, to look at anyone's computer. In my view, we need to shine a light on the collective failures that have got us into this mess. Not your failures, the Minister's failures, but the failures that we now have to clean up. My constituents deserve to know, and I need to know. The Minister knows that I will not rest until we see a closure notice, and I hope the Environment Agency are listening to me today. And I call on them to share their correspondence with the County Council and the Borough Council with me too. Now, Mr Vickers, Walleys Quarry Limited have written to me several times asking to meet, and I think it's important for me to put that on the record. But I think it's also important for me to put on the record that if they'd turned up to the cross-party public inquiry at the Council, we could have met there. And they could have taken part in an evidence-based democratic process with clear transparency for my constituents. We now are looking to fill a £20 billion black hole in the national finances. So can I ask the Minister what discussions are taking place across government to make sure that landfill operators are paying their fair share? Can I urge the Minister to raise landfill tax levels with the Treasury? I know that increasing the tax on landfill operators will go down very well in my constituency. The people, Mr Vickers, of Newcastle-under-Lyme have had enough. They simply want to get on with their lives and be free from the horrendous and dangerous impact of Walleys Quarry. This cannot be too much to ask, and I will keep fighting alongside all those who want clean air and healthy lungs, healthy hearts and healthy minds, right across Newcastle-under-Lyme, until we get the closure notice that we desperately need and the proper restoration plan to go with it. Thank you.
Members that they should bob if they wish to speak in the debate. The question is that this House has considered waste crime in Staffordshire. Gareth Snell.
Thank you very much, Mr Vickers, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship in this committee. And may I start by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Newcastle-under-Lyme, on securing such an important debate in this place so early into what I know will be a long and illustrious parliamentary career that he will have here. I'd also like to, and although he may have left, pick up the point that was made by the honourable gentleman from Strangford. Waste crime often is almost seen as a harmless activity. It's too often considered to be something that doesn't hurt anybody, therefore the urge to deal with it doesn't necessarily manifest itself in immediate action. And I think the point that the honourable gentleman made when he was here about the necessity for significant fines that are robustly levied and vigorously fought to collect would be a huge deterrent for those rogue operators who, whatever form their action takes, know that there will be a penalty for the blight they cause to communities, but also the damage they do to people. I would like to constrain my comments firstly to the site that the honourable member for Newcastle has already raised, Walleys Quarry. I had the pleasure of being a district councillor in the neighbouring authority of Newcastle-under-Lyme. Started that 14 years ago. And the very first piece of casework I had was about Walleys Quarry, about the smell that emanated from it, about the activities that were happening on site, about the questionable content of lorries that were driving up Cemetery Road on a quiet morning, and the flock of seagulls that would feast from overhead at what was being deposited. And even then, and this was several operators ago since then, trying to actually get to the bottom of what was going into that site, what was happening on that site, was impossible. It was an opaque nature of obfuscation and sleight of hand by people who at the time simply tried to, I believe, tell the community that it was all good, it was all fine, and by the way, the landfill fund that you can bid for your community offsets the fact that we're here. And I remember even they started by one day trying to blame the smell on the neighbouring sewage treatment plant and directing me and my then ward colleagues to talk to Severn Trent Water about what must obviously be a faulty sewerage outlet. And that was the attitude that, for me, unfortunately, summed up any interaction with the operating company of that site for many, many years. And it was one in which the concerns of residents were secondary, where as long as they were operating and they were bringing in their waste and they were able to fill it into the hole, cover it with a layer of clay and say that it was capped off properly, they were not particularly worried about the impact. And this has gone on for years and years and years, so I genuinely do congratulate my friend for having been able to bring this to the House's attention today. Because although I no longer am resident in his constituency, I'm no longer the councillor for the village of Silverdale. When I moved to where I am now, my lung health dramatically improved. I am asthmatic. I lived in Silverdale for about 15 years, and every day my Ventolin inhaler was glued to my pocket because at some point I would have some sort of triggering event that would require me to take the reliever. When I moved a mere 3 miles away to where I am now, about 3 years ago. My lung health dramatically improved. I now no longer need my Ventolin inhaler as frequently as I do. Now, my lifestyle has not changed. If anything, you know, my burgeoning waistline has put me in a slightly less healthy position, and the only common factor that I can consider has had that impact on my health was the air that I was breathing on a daily basis. So I'm glad that we're discussing this. I'm glad that we're doing this in the format of a Westminster Hall debate where we can consider at length the issues. But I would say to the Minister, my friend, who I've known for many years now, the debate around this issue locally has gone on for a while. What we are seeking now, and I have great faith that she will deliver, is some action that has been missing under the previous government. And although my constituency is 3 miles away, much like my friend in Stoke-on-Trent South, there are some mornings, particularly cold mornings, crisp weather mornings, where I will open my front door, I will walk out to the bottom of my street, and I will be able to smell the landfill site that is 3 miles away. It is a smell you do not forget. If you have lived there, and you know the area, it doesn't matter where you are in North Staffordshire, if you can smell it, you can smell it, and you know what it is, because it is that same scent wherever it manifests. And my daughter, who only up until a couple of years ago was still going to school in Silverdale, if we were driving towards the school, it would get stronger and stronger and stronger, and you would get to the crossroads at the bottom of Cemetery Road and Silverdale Road, and you would hope with all your heart that the lights were on green, because the last thing you wanted to do was sit there while the rotation went through of the traffic lights, knowing that you would be stuck in the puddle of foul, stenching air that was almost certainly coming from Walleys Quarry. And what may have only been 4 or 5 minutes as the traffic lights cycled through their rota would feel like an age as you were breathing in what was, I have no doubt, was harmful, somewhat poisonous gas from the operating site. And so the fact that we're debating this today is welcome, but as I said to the Minister, I would like to hope now that we have a new set of members of Parliament for North Staffordshire, now that we have a new government, that there is an opportunity to reset national action on this so that we can get the outcome for local people that we need. But I want to expand my points, if I may, Mr Vickers, to wider issues across North Staffordshire of waste crime. Because whilst Walleys Quarry is undoubtedly a national disgrace, there are other parts of North Staffordshire that have equally found themselves at the mercy of reprehensible individuals who have undertaken to make a fast buck on the back of local communities through the way that they've dealt with waste. And one of those sites was the old Twyford factories in the middle of Etruria in my Stoke-on-Trent Central constituency. And I first raised this with the then Minister back in 2018, when it was quite clear that this factory was stuffed to the rafters with illegally accepted industrial waste. The Chief Fire Officer at the time for Staffordshire, Becky Bryant, had made quite clear that if there was a fire on that site, it would be devastating, not just to the immediate area where there were business trying to operate, but being as it was next to the West Coast Main Line, it would have shut down the West Coast Main Line for months. It would have required significant public investment to make the railway safe, and the untold health implications would not be known for many, many years. The waste that was in there, nobody knew. How much was in there, nobody knew. But all you could see as you drove around the A500 in Stoke-on-Trent with this once proud factory of manufacturing history in Stoke-on-Trent, and through the graffitied windows, you could just see these polythene bales of unknown materials stacked one upon the other. And I was told by the Chief Fire Officer that their genuine concern was spontaneous combustion, because tightly packed unknown materials in plastic can sometimes just simply set itself on fire. And this was in the heart of my constituency, next to a residential housing development of several hundred people. And at the time, to his credit, the member for Newark, who was the minister at the time, was happy to look at how we could use funds from the Department of the Environment to try and clear that site. And the former Secretary of State, Michael Gove, met, discussed, and we had a plan. And to her very credit, my successor and predecessor, Joe Gideon, fought very hard to get that site cleared. She made it a priority for her constituency and her constituents, and that site got cleared. But that site got cleared, Mr Vickers, at a cost to the public purse of around £10 million. £10 million of public money to clear one site in one constituency. And it took a very long time. It took a long time, not because there was any interaction from the government to take it forward, not because there was any local reason why. It was simply because every time we got to a point where an enforcement notice could be raised, the owner would make a promise that they would clear it up. And so the enforcement notice wouldn't get taken forward. Then we went down the cost recovery route for proceeds of crime, which took an inordinately long time. Then there was a fine levied against the owner to have it cleared, and he was given 6 months to raise the money to pay for it. And while all these additional times were being built into this one side, it remained a huge fire risk. It remained a health and safety risk to the neighbouring businesses on site, one of whom subsequently closed up and moved to another site simply for their own safety. And it was an eyesore in the middle of Stoke-on-Trent. And I would say to the Minister, again, who I know takes a huge interest in our environment, takes a huge interest in how we can make communities like mine better, more prosperous, more sustainable. When you have a prime development site, as this site was, that was being slowed down to be brought forward for development because we were wrangling with one individual who had made an obscene amount of money through accepting illegal waste onto that site, and then didn't want to have to use any of that money to clear it up. Not only is it a waste of taxpayers' money that we then had to clear it up, but it slowed down the economic regeneration and development of Etruria and Hanley, part of my constituency. And to this day, although it is now cleared, that site stands vacant. And the opportunities that could have presented on that site for development would have been game-changing for my constituency. So it's not necessarily just the cost of having to clean up those sites. It's those lost opportunity costs that exist in cities where you find huge buildings that are being misused by individuals who simply seek to make a fast buck. I will indeed, yes.
They will work this time. I thank the member for raising that issue. Around 7 years ago, a similar site in Lichfield City, the old GKN site, also had bailed up waste disposed in it. We believe that actually it was fly tipped in there, or certainly my understanding is that. That did catch fire, suspected arson. It was the fourth one in Staffordshire that year. That particular fire took 8 appliances and 65 firefighters to deal with it. And similarly to the site that you're raising, that site has been cleared but is still awaiting development. So this is endemic across Staffordshire, and I thank the member for raising it.
First of all, I'm very grateful to be able to say thank you to my honourable friend from Lichfield, something that when I was here last time I never thought would have the opportunity to, but it fills my heart with glee to be able to do so. And he's absolutely right. I'm sure this debate could quite easily just been called waste crime, brackets, anywhere in the country, because these duplicitous operators who seek to make money off the backs of our communities without any care or attention are happening everywhere. And we know they're happening everywhere. And I'm sure that my honourable friend, the new minister, will be clamping down on them hard. But I want to turn to a slightly more about how we do that, because whilst we can all air our grievances on the sites in our constituencies, I would like to also spend a few moments, if I may, Mr Vickers, to focus on what comes next. And I tend to agree with what my honourable friend from Newcastle-under-Lyme said about the fit-for-purpose nature of the Environment Agency. Now, I'm going to be slightly more generous to the Environment Agency than he was, and that's absolutely fine. He rightly has a grievance with them over the operation of Walleys Quarry. But I think there stems a bigger problem about the way that we do regulatory enforcement in this country as a whole. And the Environment Agency is an example that is an example which we can use to demonstrate it. So an organisation called Unchecked UK produce every so often something called the Enforcement Gap document. And it seeks to look at how regulatory organisations and agencies have done less and less enforcement over time. And what they found in their 2020 Enforcement Gap report was that between the period of 2010 and 2020, the number of staff working for the Environment Agency had decreased by 32%. So 1 in 3 staff disappeared. They also found that over that same period of time, Mr Vickers, that the budget for the Environment Agency decreased by 63%. As a result, the number of prosecutions they were able to undertake decreased by 88%. They also were unable to, the number of enforcement notices they were able to levy as a result went down by 69.5%. And they were only really able to take 44% of those notices through to prosecution because there was a lack of capacity within the Environment Agency to undertake that necessary regulatory enforcement work. So whilst it is absolutely right, and we must not excuse the actions of those individuals that perpetrate waste crimes around our country, it is not inconceivable to think why it is they believe this is a lucrative trade in which they can spend their time and their energies, because the likelihood of getting caught, the likelihood of an enforcement notice being levied upon you, the likelihood of a prosecution being brought has gone down and down and down over the last 10 years. And it's not just the Environment Agency that have had this problem, Mr Vickers. Local authorities around the country who have a really important environmental health aspect, who quite often can take small-scale actions in communities to prevent a much larger destructive activity taking place, have suffered the same blight, to the point that over the last 10 years, 32% of environmental health staff have been lost in local authorities, which means many of the actions that we have been speaking about this afternoon become reactive to a problem. It means that the enforcement and regulatory agencies out there react to a problem. What they are unable to do today is take pre-active and preventative work to stop things becoming a problem in the first place. Of course.
To further your comments, we have to think about the involvement of other agencies. Within Staffordshire, and I'm sure elsewhere, particularly fly tipping and the illegal dumping of waste is often linked to organised crime. And so therefore, your points that you were made with regards to local government and also the Environment Agency and regulators also extend to that of police and the role of preventative policing involved in that.
I thank the Honourable Lady for intervention. It's almost as if she read the script in front of me, Mr Vickers, because she's perfectly lined me up for the next point I was going to make, which is about the link between illegal dumping, fly tipping in communities, and the wider connection to organised crime and money making. And again, another report from Unchecked UK, published in 2022, pointed out that enforcement against fly tipping was at a 10-year low, whilst the number of incidents of fly tipping was at a 10-year high. A growing chasm between what is happening on the ground and what activities are being prevented and punished by perpetrators.
Will my honourable friend give way? Thank you. I'm in the neighbouring county of Warwickshire, and we share many borders with Staffordshire, and fly tipping is at an all-time high in my constituency, and much of that is from organised crime from the local neighbouring boroughs of Tamworth and of Coventry and Birmingham. They come along the M42, the M6 or the A5 and dump waste in farmers' entrances in the middle of the night. It was the biggest issue that was raised when I met recently with the National Farmers Union in my area. It's also the #1 issue raised by our local rural crime service. And yet it's not something that is taken seriously by the Police and Crime Commissioner for Warwickshire, with any amount of funding spent on advising people not to use white vans that parade the streets, offering to remove their waste. It's the #1 thing I also see every day when I turn on my local Facebook page. Somebody is reporting an incident of fly tipping on their Facebook page. They have no idea, because there's no money spent on publicity, where to report these crimes to, whether they should be reporting them to the local authority, the Environment Agency, or the police. There has to be some more joined-up working, and I would like to see the Minister leading in that joined-up working going forward. Thank you very much.
Gareth Snell.
Thank you, Mr Vickers. And I agree with everything that my honourable friend just said, and we should think about this not simply as community blight. Certainly on fly tipping, it's not just community blight. It's not just about that sofa down the back alley that's been abandoned. It's about the fact this is cross-county, cross-border, organised crime that is making millions and millions of pounds for people in our communities, who frankly have no interest in our communities, and I think she's made the point rather eloquently about the requirement of our police and crime commissioners to understand that this is an important issue that they must prioritise and tackle. I was going to say, Mr Vickers, on the point of fly tipping that my two honourable friends have raised, going back to the point about the longer term impact of this, yes, fly tipping again is waste crime that takes place in Staffordshire, and the House of Commons library note that accompanies this debate gives a rather sad figure for the 2022-2023 figures for Stoke-on-Trent, suggesting that almost half of all fly tipping incidents across the whole of Staffordshire took place in Stoke-on-Trent. I mean, that's not a record that I'm particularly proud of, and that's not something that I would particularly want to be associated with my city, which is why I'm glad that upon their election in 2023, under the expert leadership of Councillor Amjad Wazir, the Deputy Leader of the Council, the City Council launched a clean-up campaign about illegal dumping in our towns under the moniker of idiot. Don't be an idiot was their line. Don't dump in our towns. Don't allow our community to be used by those organised crimes, criminal gangs who want to ruin up our cities. And the outcome of that, Mr Vickers, has been spectacular. We now have considerably fewer incidents of fly tipping, and we have considerably fewer incidents of fly tipping, not only because the council now make a concerted effort to go and clear it up, but they have invested in an environmental crime unit that now seeks to prosecute and fine those people who dump waste in our towns and cities, and they have doubled, I believe, might have tripled the number of fines that have been handed out by the City Council, and they are pursuing people through the courts where they refuse to pay the fine, and making it very clear that if you wish to undertake illegal activity relating to waste in Stoke-on-Trent at a community level, they are coming for you, they will find you, they will fine you, and I personally, Mr Vickers, would like a name and shame campaign, but I haven't quite won the battle with the council yet, but give it time. But if I can conclude my remarks by saying that I think what I would not want to be taken away from this debate is the idea that Staffordshire is somehow the nation's dustbin, that we are strewn with all of these terrible activities. Because whilst we have these incidences, most of the people in our communities, most of the people that live in Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire want to see clean neighbourhoods. They go out every day and they do a little bit of work to try and make their community better. They clean up the fly tipping, they report the illegally dumped sofa, they report to the Environment Agency the smells, they will report to the police where they see buildings that have been abandoned that suddenly start having industrial waste put near them. And they do this because they know and they believe and they want, as does everyone else in my constituency and my county and my city, they want to live in a clean, tidy, safe place. And so I would ask the Minister if, when she is winding up her comments later, if she could give me some sense of hope that I may take back to Stoke-on-Trent, that this government, with this Minister, will make sure that that aspiration for clean and safe streets in every community is something that they will be delivering on, and let us know how we can help her in achieving that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Vickers. First of all, can I congratulate the member for Newcastle-under-Lyme for organising this debate. It's a very important topic, and I commend the research that he has done and put into his speech, illuminating us onto the scale of the problem. 34 million tonnes and 18% of waste being illegally disposed of, and £1 billion in costs, with a 55% increase since 2019, shows just what a very significant problem and challenge this is, and one that it's very important that we work collaboratively on to tackle. The Honourable Member for Newcastle-under-Lyme also showed the passion that his community has for dealing with waste and working collaboratively, and it's also been very good to hear praising of predecessor MPs from other parties, both from himself and the member for Stoke-on-Trent North, which again shows the value of working cross-party on this topic. Some key themes have emerged in this debate. We've heard about the environment and the nature impact of the problem, in particular the risk of lithium dumping in landfill sites and the consequent risk of fire. And indeed, not just a risk, fires of significant nature have been highlighted in a number of contexts. There's also the health impact on local residents affected by the by the facilities near residential areas. And the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent South quite rightly highlighted the benefits and importance of having a healthy workforce in order to, for our economy to be able to grow and productivity to be improved. Various speakers have highlighted the economic impact of the problem, with issues in various constituencies of a lack of land available for development because previous waste facilities have not been cleared up, as well as the workforce productivity challenge that was mentioned. We've also heard the importance of cross-party and cross-agency working in order to tackle waste within Staffordshire and indeed nationally. Many agencies have been cited. Local authorities clearly have a role, as do the police, and we've also heard from a number of members of the importance of strengthening the Environment Agency's resources and powers and ability to enforce. Many businesses are affected, and within my own constituency in Oxfordshire, we have a landfill operator who has been causing similar problems to those discussed in terms of significant odours and not always being as transparent and proactive in their engagement and communication with local communities as we may wish. I think a key thing that I hope will come as a result of this debate is the importance also of tackling the root causes of the waste problem that we face. Our recycling rates within the United Kingdom remain lower than comparable European countries, although they have been improving. And the more that we can all do to help business and households to tackle those root causes will reduce the need for some of these waste facilities. I will.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. He rightly talks about recycling rates in the United Kingdom. I noted in my remarks the Welsh example, and although we're very proud English MPs, it is important to note that Wales had the world's third highest rates of recycling, but too much alliteration there. And so we can see examples of where this works. You know, there was talk before about 7-8 million bins. That's not what we're talking about. You can, through education, proper engagement, and support for local authorities, really make a headway, and the Welsh have shown that.
Yes, thank you for the Honourable Member's intervention. Yes, it's very good to hear of Welsh good practice in terms of reducing waste demands. And yes, and it is clearly important that we work to create an economy where we think of the whole life cycle of products and produce, and in the way that things are designed, thinking of how they were going to be able to be disposed of effectively and in an environmentally friendly manner. We've also heard of the impact of house prices by some of the waste facilities within Staffordshire and the impact that that has on people's ability to move. The debate has been very helpful for highlighting some of those wider impacts and challenges. This is not just about fly tipping or about local nuisance. It has real consequences and impacts on people's lives. And I think we've also heard some very useful comments from this member for Stoke-on-Trent North about how some of the operators of these facilities can sometimes be inclined to misdirect the cause of these odours and try and blame them on other things such as sewage. And within my own constituency, I've seen that being done about agricultural fertiliser. And that is why it is so important that there is the engagement and listening with local residents, and that the Environment Agency has the resources to collate that data and intelligence so that the problems can be properly mapped and anticipated, so that interventions can be made. In conclusion, I think that today's debate has been very useful for highlighting the problems of waste management within Staffordshire, but it has also highlighted how these themes are relevant across the country. And I look forward to hearing the Minister's thoughts and remarks on how the new government will just attempt to tackle these problems. Thank you very much.
Mr Vickers, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I thank the Honourable Member for Newcastle-under-Lyme for securing this vitally important debate, and also welcome him to the House. And may I also say, Mr Vickers, can I send him and his father the best wishes following his father's surgery that took place yesterday. It's also good to see the Minister in her place again for another, I think, our second debate this week. And may I use this opportunity, Mr Vickers, just to put on record my thanks to all the officials within the department who worked with me when I was lucky enough to be, I think, in the best department in government, specifically on the waste and resources strategy. And I'd be kind if she wouldn't mind passing my thanks on, particularly to Emma and Claire, who are in the waste resources team. Now, I would like to start my speech by echoing comments made by colleagues throughout this debate about the dangers of the costs of waste crime to local communities, which is undoubtedly huge. The Environment Agency's National Waste Crime Survey of 2023 report stated that waste crime across the economy in England costs us an estimated just over 1 billion per year through evaded tax, environmental and social harm, and lost legitimate business. This impact is, of course, not only monetary. Waste crime in its many forms poses a significant threat to our environment. Illegal dumping and the improper disposal of hazardous waste contaminates our land, water and air. And these pollutants can take years, if not decades, to break down, causing long-term damages to ecosystems and biodiversity. They poison our water supplies, degrade our soils and harm wildlife, leaving a legacy of destruction that future generations must deal with. Most pressingly is the extremely negative impact it has on communities up and down the country, who are forced to deal with the effects of damaging consequences that harmful pollutants and emissions can have. And as we are all constituency MPs, we know that we have residents that are being directly impacted in our own constituencies, whether that be fly tipping or waste crime of a more serious nature. And I know that this is something that my constituents unfortunately experience in Keighley, Ilkley, Craven and the wider Worth Valley. Now, I would like to spend the rest of my time speaking in this debate specifically about Walleys Quarry in Newcastle-under-Lyme, where I completely sympathise with the residents, businesses and the wider community, not just of Newcastle-upon-Lyme, but Silverdale and the wider Stoke-on-Trent area, who have been fighting this issue for a significant number of years, for far too many years. And I would like to take a moment to commend the Honourable Member for Newcastle-upon-Lyme's predecessor, Aaron Bell, for his tireless campaigning over the 4 years that he was lucky enough to be in this House to try and seek a solution. I know that the work that Aaron Bell worked on, working with his constituents to try and seek a way forward, was not only trying to hold the operator of Walleys Quarry to account, but also the regulator and the enforcer, the Environment Agency. He was also instrumental in working with Stop the Stink campaign, and I'm sure that the new member for Newcastle-under-Lyme will continue the good work of his predecessor, as he has done by securing this very debate. Now, I was lucky enough to be a minister in what I have to say is probably the best department in government for a short period of time, from just November last year up until the general election. And in that time, I visited Newcastle-under-Lyme and to Silverdale to meet with campaigners, local councillors, residents and the previous MP to hear directly from them about the negative consequences Walleys Quarry was having. And I deeply sympathised with the points that they were making. And as a result of these meetings, I made it clear that the Environment Agency, over a period of time, had failed in their duties, had failed local residents, and based on what has been said today, and has been, to be quite frank, repeatedly warned to the Environment Agency by many, including myself when I was lucky enough to be in the department, that they are of the attitude that seemingly think that the operator will clean up its act by themselves, and this just simply is not the case. Residents' concerns about toxic fumes have been raised since 2012, albeit largely ignored by the Environment Agency as the regulator, meaning that the ongoing situation continues to have a substantial negative impact on the community, not only just the community's economic challenges, but their health and well-being as well. And the reality is that the Environment Agency's actions have gone nowhere near far enough, and in my view, the landfill site needs to be closed altogether. the Minister will know that this is exactly the points that I was trying to put across to the Environment Agency during my short time in the department. And as the Minister will know, and assuming that she has been briefed sufficiently on previous meetings that had taken place, I was also disheartened that the Environment Agency had... I was so disheartened by the Environment Agency's actions that I requested weekly meetings with the Environment Agency's team to understand sufficiently what actions they were taking as the regulator and the enforcer. Public hearings held in July demonstrated the serious public health issues arising from the fumes coming from the site, with the Staffordshire Director of Health and Care highlighting the negative impact on public health and the risk of the noxious gases pose both short-term and long-term on health implications. One of the other huge concerns that was quite rightly raised when I met with residents was not only the negative impact it was having directly on them, but the local economy, not only just across Newcastle-upon-Lyme, but across the wider Stoke-on-Trent area. Businesses, cafes, shops, a sports centre, a sports club which I was lucky enough to visit, and even a local school are all being negatively impacted. Again, something which, had the Environment Agency taken robust action, they could have reduced the financial, environmental and social impacts. Yes, I will.
To me and my family. I was going to be a bit meaner to the Shadow Minister than I was, than I may be now, but I just want to ask and my father's son, two questions. One, the Shadow Minister in February 2024, just after, a few weeks after the now Secretary of State visit to Newcastle, the Honourable Gentleman quite rightly visited, and he said no options were off the table. What did that actually mean? One. And the second part of the question, Mr Vickers, would be, does the Shadow Minister think the Environment Agency has the powers it needs to properly get this sorted?
So I think from when I recall, I distinctly said that no options were off the table from the dispatch box in the House of Commons, and that was specifically meaning that, in my view, the site should be closed. And and officials will know that they were the points that were specifically being made to officials within the department and at the Environment Agency. But there are other challenges that officials will put to you to do with legal implications and the processes which need to be followed. And I'm sure that those are the challenges that the current Minister will have to deal with before the Environment Agency is able to issue any further action. But there was a clear advocacy specifically from the ministerial team that Walleys Quarry should be closed. And I wish the Minister well, and I'm prepared to work with the Minister to ensure that that case and that solution can be adhered and can be reached. The Environment Agency also singly failed to find a solution to sufficiently safeguard the local community against the hazard presented by hydrogen sulfide, a gas released when waste breaks down on the site. A strong eggy smell, which I experienced for myself when I visited the site, and something which residents have had to put up with for far, far too long. And in my view, urgent and decisive action from the Environment Agency is required right now. And I certainly made these frustrations, as I've indicated, known whilst I was in the department. And from the hearings, the Environment Agency has expressed its sympathy for local residents. However, now is not the time for sympathy. Now is the time for action, not words. And the Environment Agency put in place regular inspections to monitor levels of hydrogen sulfide. However, latest data suggests mass underreporting of its extent, and the levels at the site being an average 80% higher than reported by the Environment Agency over a 2-year period. The Environment Agency's response to its latest failure on its part has been to apologise again to the concerns and announce another public meeting. Yet again, words, not actions. We all know that data collection is incredibly important for an enforcer to be able to take action. But the Environment Agency failed in this simple task, and failed, in my view, to put monitoring points in appropriate locations around the Walleys Quarry site.
Thank the Shadow Minister for giving way, Rich. Just to sort of further the point made by my honourable friend, there had been 10 years of data. I know because I used to ring them frequently, the Environment Agency, myself, in 2010, when I was in my constituency surgeries in the library in Silverdale, and we could smell the smell. What more did he, as the former minister, now Shadow Minister, believe that he would have needed in order to give a closure notice? And given that we basically all seem to agree that this has been a decade of failure by the Environment Agency, when he was the Minister, what did he undertake to try and work out what the failings internally were so that other communities that may have these problems don't have the long period of terribleness that we've had?
Monitoring it, as I said, is incredibly important because you need the data to be able to hold those who pollute to account, to be able to take appropriate enforcement action if you are the regulator, as the Environment Agency should do. But that data has got to be collected appropriately, which it hadn't done in my view, and the data sets have got to be accurate. If we look back, there was a calibration issue with the data sets that were being collected, which meant that the Environment Agency even had to issue a further apology. Completely unacceptable in my view. And also this raises the bigger question that has already been raised by the member for Newcastle-under-Lyme. Is the Environment Agency in its current format fit for purpose? And that was something that and all of these challenges that I'm laying out today is something that I certainly experienced in the short months that I was in the department. And this simply isn't good enough action by the Environment Agency. And in my view, as I've stipulated, the site should be closed. Again, something which I advocated whilst in the department. And as the Honourable Member has said, this does lead to the bigger question. Is the Environment Agency fit for purpose? Now, I know in our earlier debate in the week, I kindly put some questions to the Minister to seek a response, and I'd like to do that again today. But can I kindly ask that if the Minister is unable to give an answer to me right now, which I quite appreciate, could I kindly ask the Minister that she puts her responses in writing to me for the benefit of us all in this room, not at least the residents in Newcastle-upon-Lyme. And I must note that these are some of the similar questions that I've put previously to officials. Could the Minister update the House on the current situation at Walleys Quarry? And is she content with the advice that she is being given by the Environment Agency? Does the Minister agree with me that Walleys Quarry should be closed with immediate effect, as was strongly advocated by previous ministers in the department? Very briefly, and then I'll have to...
An unparalleled position of knowledge compared to all of us, having been the Minister at the time where he was advocating for the immediate closure. I think it should be immediately closed. Now, he said what was he missing as the Minister? What was the lever that was just out of reach from his grasp that he could not pull to immediately see that site closure? Because if there is a legislative change that needs to be made, we can write the bill here and now, we can take it to the House and try and get it passed. But I'm just conscious, he's been there. He knows why it couldn't happen. Can he tell us what else he would have needed to get the job done?
So in my view, it came down to process. So there is a process that needed to be followed with a suspension notice being served in the first instance to reasonably give the operator the chance to sort themselves out. This is not a sufficient process, in my view, for that satisfies residents, businesses and the wider community. And it was advocated to me that this process needed to be adhered to before we could get to the position of issuing a closure notice. Now, I wish the Minister extremely well, and she will have my full support in trying to achieve that closure notice at speed, because I think that is the only way of being able to issue a clear warning to the operator that if they pollute, they cannot get away, and the taxpayer should not be having to pay for it. So just quickly coming back to my questions, how many other landfill sites are being impacted by illegal waste dumping? How many other sites are there where local residents are being negatively impacted by pollutants and emissions? And I'm not going to, only because I think the Minister needs 20 minutes to sum up, and I think that's only fair just to give that to her. Does the Minister agree with me that when landfill sites are given initial planning permission, or sites of similar nature, a bond should be put in place that deals with the remediation costs and compensation issue payments, for example, so that if you have a dodgy operator, like we have seen at Walleys Quarry, and they don't adhere to the conditions that they have signed up to, or they go bust, that local residents then, in Newcastle-upon-Lyme or elsewhere, are not exposed to the costs. Sorry, I do apologise. Under-Lyme. This is because I previously worked in Newcastle-upon-Lyme for a long time, but sorry. But I believe that when John Prescott, who awarded the initial planning consent for the site, I believe that such a bond was not put in place for this site. And does the Minister agree with me that the taxpayer should not have to pay a penny to clean up the costs associated with the remediation works, clean-up works, or indeed the enforcement programme that the Environment Agency should be carrying out when we know an operator is wrong? It must be the polluter that pays, not the honourable member's constituents, or indeed the local council. And further to that point, does the Minister agree that when we talk about polluter pays, any fine the EA impose should include a compensatory element to those that have been impacted? And finally, does the Minister think that the Environment Agency is fit for purpose in its current format as a robust regulator and enforcer? And I generally wish the Minister well on the specific issue, and she has my full support in trying to seek a closure notice for this site.
Oh. Thank you very much indeed, Mr Vickers, and it's an honour to serve under your chairmanship today. Can I begin by congratulating my honourable friend for Newcastle-under-Lyme on securing this debate and for his ongoing work for his constituents. And can I also, I would very much like to extend my best wishes to my honourable friend's father and wish him a speedy recovery. I also pay tribute to the work that he did before his entry to this place, working alongside our honourable friend, the member for Newport West, on this area. Everybody's environment starts outside their front door, and we have heard today of the issues outside the front doors and on the school playing fields and on the sports grounds in Newcastle-under-Lyme and in Stoke-on-Trent and across wider Staffordshire. And we had some very powerful speeches and interventions, in particular from our honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent Central, who I'm delighted to see back in this place. This government will ensure that those who illegally dump their waste are brought to justice. Waste crime and poor-performing waste sites threaten our environment and, in some cases, as we heard in his speech, our health as well. But the truth is that the system that we inherited is broken. We have heard of the perfect storm of cuts to councils, cuts to police officers, cuts to the Environment Agency, and a system that has had no new policy for 14 years. A system based on paper-based notes kept in people's drawers. That is an anachronism in a 21st century, and it is a system that, as we have heard, is being exploited by waste criminals up and down the country. Waste crime costs this country £1 billion a year. We know that 18% of waste may be handled illegally at some point in the waste supply chain. We have to plug the gaps, we have to fix the system and pretty much rebuild it. At the end of March 2024, there were 320 known active illegal waste sites, and 141 of those are high risk. But we also know that waste crime is hugely underreported. Only 25% of it is actually reported. And the Environment Agency receives thousands of reports of waste, 9,000 in 2022. So it's an agency dealing with a huge amount of reports. It has just 240 officials to deal with 9,000 reports each year. We don't need to do the maths. We've got some young people in the room. I'm sure they're much better at maths than I am. But we can do the maths. It is impossible for that agency to track down and to follow up each single crime. But what we need to do is to start tightening the system, seeing the patterns and working together across different agencies. So this situation cannot continue. In our manifesto, we committed to forcing fly tippers and vandals to clean up the mess that they have created as part of our crackdown on antisocial behaviour. And we will take our country back from the fly tippers and the waste criminals who disgrace and despoil our communities, damage our environment and undermine legitimate businesses who do the right thing, who play their part, and who do, fully comply with the regulations that there are. So the Honourable Gentleman has asked me, is it fit for purpose? Is the system fit for purpose? And the answer that I have is that it is not. And we are going to have action at pace to tackle this. As a mission-led government, we will achieve our aims by focusing on ambitious, measurable and long-term objectives that will provide our driving sense of purpose. We will be publishing a circular economy strategy to move us to a future where we keep our resources in use for longer and where waste is reduced. This will increase investment in critical infrastructure and green jobs. And of course, waste crime, whether in Staffordshire or elsewhere, threatens that circular economy because it takes the resources out of it and it undermines the businesses who are doing the right thing. Now, there is an important distinction to be made between waste crime, which is often associated with serious and organised crime groups, and permitted but poorly performing waste sites, of which Walleys Quarry is the preeminent example in this country. The approaches to mitigating the impacts are very different. Over the last 4 years in Staffordshire, the Environment Agency has ensured 4 illegal high-risk fire sites have been cleared of waste. This is over 40,000 tonnes of baled waste, and made sure it was sent to suitably permitted facilities, reducing the fire risk and protecting over 12,000 properties from the impacts. And what I would just say to all of us is the issue about batteries. We all know that every supermarket has a battery collection point, but it's very easy when you have these little lithium-ion, the little batteries. It's just tiny, can't be bothered, don't want to collect it, forgot it when I took it to the supermarket, and you just chuck it in the bin. The problem with that is that when the waste is crushed in the machinery, it can spark, and it's incumbent on every single person in this room, watching at home online, thinking about these issues, to make sure that we don't put our batteries into our household waste. And there's a big education piece to be done here, and I pay tribute to the councils that have really sort of taken this to heart. And I was reflecting, and I was listening to the speech about Stoke-on-Trent Central, about what had happened there, because I asked for fixed penalty notice stats from all of the authorities in Staffordshire. And what I saw is that on Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council, just 3 fixed penalty notices issued for fly tipping in 2022-23, and 0 prosecutions. And then the Don't Be an Idiot campaign in Stoke-on-Trent City Council, 875 fixed penalty notices for fly tipping and 9 prosecutions. And I think that would put them in probably certainly the top half, maybe the top 10% of local authorities in the country. So I do pay tribute to the work of that Labour-led council.
Will the Minister give way?
I will.
I thank the Minister for her initial remarks in response to this debate. And I would just like to echo the point she's made about the leadership being shown by Stoke-on-Trent. I just dearly wish the Conservative-led Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council would follow the example when it comes to cleaning up the streets and the idiot campaign. We should give my constituents the benefits they deserve.
Thank you. I thank him for that intervention, and I do think that we all have a lot to learn from each other. I offered those statistics in the spirit of cooperation and encouraging good practice. Between January 2023 and the 2nd of August 24, there were 21 substantiated illegal waste sites in the Staffordshire area, and all 21 of those sites have been stopped from operating, the vast majority within 3 months of them being reported to the Environment Agency. 5 of those 21 have been fully cleaned up, while the risks posed by the remaining sites are being managed and monitored. So the Environment Agency regulates over 10,000 waste permits, and the majority of which are in the top compliance bands. However, I am aware that 3%, around 300 of those permits, which are attracting public interest, i.e. they are not in compliance. And it is those that disproportionately take up resource and energy and regulatory activity. And I have stressed to the Environment Agency officials who I spent time with today ahead of this debate, that my top priority is taking action to bring these sites back into compliance and, where necessary, embarking upon criminal investigations. Walleys Quarry. One of these sites, one of the non-compliant sites, has been a source of concern for residents over several years, as we have heard. And I was informed this morning that this is the worst performing waste site in the country. My honourable friend for Newcastle-under-Lyme has asked for a meeting with me. I will be only too happy to meet with him, and I shall ask Environment Agency officials and DEFRA officials to be in the room with him for that meeting so we can have a full discussion and really get to the bottom and the heart of what is going on there. The Environment Agency has carried out significant activity since 2021, more than for any other regulated site, and a criminal investigation is also underway, about which I cannot say more for fear of prejudicing those inquiries. However, I am clear, and I say to the local residents and councillors that are in the room here with us today, that that you have had to put up with unacceptable levels of hydrogen sulfide. Interestingly, that is a substance that comes from the plasterboard that we all have. So it's when it's broken down and smashed up. So, you know, another thing for us to think about as we try and design in a circular economy is what are the materials we are using in our home and what happens to them, because there's no such place as a way at their end of life. So it is not acceptable for odours to reach a level which cause serious offence to local communities. So the Environment Agency, I'm pressing them to keep all regulatory options under review and looking at its enforcement and sanctions policy. Let us look now at waste crime. In recent years, very quickly.
Can I just pick up on the question that I was asking specifically,
sure.
Just to do with closure of the site? Does the Minister believe, as I do, and I believe as the Shadow Secretary of State, as he was previously before the election, wanted to advocate closure? What does the Minister's view on that?
I have not had advice specifically on closure. It is clear there is a criminal investigation underway. We have to let that take its course. So back to serious and organised crime. In recent years, there's been an increase in the involvement of serious and organised criminal gangs in the waste sector. This is of the greatest concern to me, and it's back to the perfect storm of a broken waste system. The Joint Unit for Waste Crime brings together Environment Agency, HMRC, because criminals, in our experience, never just break the law in one area, they're always breaking it in several areas. National Crime Agency, police, waste regulators from across the UK and other partners to share intelligence, disrupt and prevent serious organised waste crime. There has been progress to target organised crime groups, and this model is respected internationally. This is not an issue that is unique to the United Kingdom. The unit has supported or led over 90 operations since April 2020 and has worked with 133 partner organisations and had 301 days of action, which have resulted in 174 associated arrests by other agencies. The Environment Agency recently announced the formation of its National Enforcement Service, a new economic crime unit which targets the money and assets of waste criminals. It will target the financial motivation behind offending and use financial mechanisms to inhibit the ability of offenders, including OCGs, to operate. It's all gone a bit line of duty there, but I'll crack on. I would also urge members of the public, it's incumbent on every one of us to report waste crime where they see it in their communities. It is underreported, and I would like to express the importance on each one of us when someone comes and says, I can take that waste away for you for 20 quid, ask to see their waste permit, ask to look up. If you're for farmers and landowners, when someone says, can I store these bales on your land, it's just a bit of plastic, it's just a bit of soil, be curious, because actually, have they got a permit? Is it really soil, or is it shredded down plastics? Because the money is moving from legitimate waste operators and then going into these organised crime groups. So we know that the impact this has on people's lives. We are determined to reform this sector. And reforming the sector starts with reform of the waste carrier, broker and dealer regime, which means those transporting or making decisions about waste must demonstrate they are competent to make those decisions. They face background checks when applying for permits, and they must display permit numbers on their advertising. We will make it easier for regulators to take actions against criminals and easier for us as households stakeholders to identify legitimate waste businesses. So I think we will... It will remove 3 exemptions, and this is really critical because, and these are obviously the highest problem areas, I would suggest. The exemptions to be removed are, first of all, for dismantling end-of-life vehicles, 2, treating end-of-life tyres, and again, the risk of fire when the tyres get higher is huge, and the recovery of scrap metal dealers. And I do remember a case in my former constituency of Wakefield where a scrap metal dealer went bust owing HMRC £60 million, and to my grievous disappointment, not a single person was prosecuted or went to prison for essentially theft from the taxpayer. We will introduce greater record-keeping requirements for all waste exemption holders and impose limits and controls on how exemptions can be managed on site. To conclude, Mr Vickers, this government is clear. We are committed to bringing waste criminals to justice. We want to have long-term ambitions to rebuild the waste sector, to create a circular economy, and we are committed to tackling both waste crime and poor performance, which is exemplified at Walleys Quarry, at regulated waste sites. I know the Environment Agency is committed to continuing its work with partners nationally and locally, and I do want to thank them for working against the odds and in over a very difficult funding environment over the last 14 years. This is predominantly an urban crime, and I think there has been a neglect under the previous government of urban areas. My honourable friend asked for deeds, not words. We will follow the principle that the polluter pays. We will find them. We are coming for them, and we will track them down. Thank you.
Adam Jogi to wind up.
I'm grateful to the Minister for her response to this debate and the points that a number of colleagues raised. I note that the Chamber is now much fuller than it was at the beginning of my debate. I shall have to encourage all colleagues now present to join our campaign to get Walleys Quarry closed, capped and safely and securely restored. The Minister in her response... I've got till 3 o'clock, do I? Right, okay, I've got 3 minutes to go. The Minister in her response used the word justice, which I think is very important indeed, because my constituents in Newcastle-under-Lyme want exactly that. I would like to press the one point on what we can do to make sure that the Environment Agency uses the money that it secures from fines to help pay for the mistakes that their inaction has caused. Now, I want to just address a few points that were mentioned in the debate. Now, I want to just touch on the Shadow Minister. Although he was very nice to me and my family, there's a few things there that, as someone who once had the job, I think it's important that we note. Now, the Shadow Minister said that the people of Newcastle-under-Lyme shouldn't pay. I quite agree. They paid for far too long and in far too many difficult ways. But I'd urge him to speak to his Conservative colleagues on Newcastle-Lyme Borough Council, who since the general election on the 5th of July now think government should be paying for the mistakes and for the restoration plan that is required. In my view, it should be the Environment Agency or indeed the people who've caused this mess. So I look forward to that message being communicated through to the Conservative group and Newcastle-Lyme Borough Council. There was also mention to Lord Prescott on how he signed off planning permission. I did do history at university, but it's not difficult to find out that the legislation that he had to give approval to went through at the end of the government previously. And as the Shadow Minister will know, having been a minister, I've never been a minister, probably never will be, but he will know that when officials make suggestions, you have to base it on what's put before you, as no doubt he did when there were discussions on Walleys Quarry. So let's focus on the facts and not play partisan games, because it's my constituents who are paying the price for the failures of the last period of time. Now, my honourable friend from Stoke-on-Trent Central, not Stoke North, as the Liberal spokesperson called him, made a number of very important points. He'll know, having been a councillor in Silverdale, just how important this is to my constituents and to him. And I'd like to echo Mr Vickers' my support for the Don't Be an Idiot campaign. I think that is an example of just how, in North Staffordshire, we say it how it is. Now, my honourable friend from Stoke-on-Trent South, my other neighbour, talked about the health implications of toxic gas and fumes, particularly those we're getting from Walleys Quarry, and the impact on her constituency, and I thank her for doing so too. My friend from North Warwickshire raised a really important point about the role that police and crime commissioners can have in making sure you hold these people to account and help support our constituents. And it's worth, I think, noting once again the Lichfield litter pickers that my honourable friend legends. No, sorry, that's the point. The alliteration. The Lichfield litter legends for what they do, and my friend from Tamworth also raised the point about supporting communities too. This is an important debate. I'm not going to stop going on about Walleys Quarry until we get the site closed, capped, and properly restored. And I'm glad the Shadow Minister now agrees with me that it shouldn't be my constituents paying for it. It should be the Environment Agency and the people who've caused this mess in the first place.
The question is that this House has considered waste crime in Staffordshire. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.